factor by grouping. Now, factor by grouping is going to involve multiple terms, and we're going to end up using 3 different GCFs in this problem. 2 of the GCFs will be monomials, and that's what we were doing in the previous section. When we were factoring GCFs, we were factoring monomial GCFs. And the factor by grouping is going to involve what we call a binomial GCF. Now, I'm going to go over what a binomial GCF is, and then we'll do the process of factor by grouping. A binomial GCF is a binomial that is exactly the same on both sides of a plus or minus sign. I'll show you what I'm talking about. We're going to have multiple terms. Here's an example. Here's my plus sign. On the left and the right side of the plus sign, we have 2 terms. We have this term and this term. Notice on the left and the right hand side, both of these terms have this, have this binomial. The x plus 3 that they have that's exactly the same is my binomial GCF. So instead of having an x squared or 4x cubed or something like that, it's got a 3x plus 3. Now, to actually factor out the GCF, remember you're going to have something in front of a set of parentheses. This time, what's going to go in the box is the 3x plus 3 in parentheses. So just like before, the GCF is going to go in front, but the GCF now is a binomial. Now we got to figure out what's going to go in the second parentheses. All right, look back up here. What do I not have highlighted? The x in front of the x plus 3 is not highlighted, so it's going to go in the second parentheses. The 3 in front of the 3x plus 3 is going to go in the second parentheses, and the plus sign in the middle goes in the second parentheses. All right, look at this one. On the left side and the right side of the minus sign, they both have an x minus 6. The x minus 6 is my GCF. Now the x minus 6, I'm going to draw my box again just to make sure. So the GCF goes first. So in the box, we're going to put the parentheses x minus 6. In the second parentheses, I'll highlight this time in, let's do pink. This, and this all goes in the second parentheses. Alright, let's look at another one. I'm going to highlight the binomial on both sides. They're exactly the same. Now, they have to be exactly the same. Let's keep that in mind. They have to match exactly. So the GCF is the x plus 7. Alright, now GCF goes first, which is the x plus 7. What goes in the second parentheses, 4x in front, the plus sign, and the 9. Alright. Now, to do the factor by grouping, here are the steps. I've broken them down into simple steps. In order to do the factor by grouping, you're going to have 4 or more terms. 4 or more. We're going to stick with 4, but you can have 5, 6, and it just depends. Alright. Whoops. Okay. Now, the first thing you're going to do is draw 2 sets of parentheses with a plus sign in the middle. Notice I've highlighted plus sign because you're going to put a plus sign every time. 2 sets of parentheses with a plus sign. You're going to put the first 2 terms in the first parentheses. You're going to put the last 2 terms in the second parentheses. Now, here is where the GCFs come into play. GCF. This first one is a monomial GCF, like what we were doing in the first section. This is a monomial GCF. This one is going to be the binomial GCF. 3 GCFs. Now, once you get the hang of this, it's not too bad. It's just remembering the steps to the factor by grouping. Alright. So the first thing it says to do is to draw 2 sets of parentheses with a plus sign in the middle. Plus sign. We take the first 2 terms. We put them in the first parentheses. We take the second 2 terms, put them in the second parentheses. Here, we're looking for GCF, just like the previous section. Notice both of these have x's, and the largest exponent is x squared. So we're going to take x squared away from everything, and we're left with x plus 3. We got a plus sign. Then we look at this parentheses and we want to see what they have in common. Now, they will always have something in common. Sometimes it may be a 1. If it's a 1, you're going to put, it's not a 1 this time, it's a 2. So we're going to put a 2 in front of the parentheses and divide. So we'll get x plus 3. If it's a 1, you're going to put a 1 where the 2 is. You've got to have something there on this stuff. Now, I'm going to highlight. So I've done the first GCF, I've done the second GCF. Now notice, they have the x plus 3 in common. The x plus 3 is the binomial GCF. What's going to go in the second parentheses is the x squared, the plus sign, and the 2. Alright, let's look at this one. We're going to draw 2 sets of parentheses, plus sign in the middle. Put the first 2 terms in the first parentheses, second 2 terms in the second parentheses. Now, we look at this one, and we're going to factor out the GCF, which is going to be x squared. And take x squared away from everything, I'm left with this. This one, they're both divisible by 7, so we're going to factor out a 7. And we're left with x minus 5. Divide by 7, we'll get x minus 5. Now we're going to highlight. Here's the x minus 5 on both sides. So the x minus 5 is my binomial GCF. What goes in the second parentheses, I'm going to highlight the x, the plus sign, and the 7. What I get at the very end, that's my factored answer. I forgot to mention it on the other one. This was the factored answer. I think I just made a mistake. That should be x squared. X squared plus 7. Alright, let's do some more. 2 sets parentheses with plus sign in the middle. First 2 terms. Second 2 terms. Now, here, we can factor out an x squared. That's what they have in common. Here, they're both divisible by 5, so we put a 5 out in front, divide by 5, we get this. Again, we'll highlight the GCF. They both have the x plus 6. So we put x plus 6 in front of my parentheses. Then I'm going to highlight what goes in the second. Oops. I'm going to highlight what goes in the second. We got an x squared and a plus sign and a 5. X squared plus 5. Now, it does not matter the order. This is the same as x squared plus 5 times x plus 6. That doesn't matter. I just put the GCF first. It doesn't matter the order of the parentheses. Right, let's do another one with a plus sign in the middle. Right, 2x cubed minus 3x squared. 14x minus 21 on this side. Here, we're going to factor out the x squared. Now this one, both of those numbers are divisible by 7, so we're going to factor out a 7. And when we divide by 7, we'll get 2x minus 3. Now, here is the binomial GCF. What's going to go in the second parentheses is the x squared, the plus sign, and the 7. And that's my factored answer. Now all these problems so far have had a plus sign in the middle. I want to do a couple that have a minus sign. So here's a minus sign in the middle. With the minus sign in the middle, your first thing you're going to do is draw a plus set of parentheses with a plus sign in the middle. I highlighted plus sign in yellow earlier. Remember, that's because you're going to do that every time, regardless of what's in the middle of the problem. The first 2 terms go in the first parentheses. Nothing changes. Oops. But you're going to put the minus in the parentheses. And I'll show you why. Now, let's look at the GCF. The GCF is x squared. So we factor out the x squared. And we're left with it. Now this time, remember, I talked about this in the previous lesson, a negative GCF. When the first term is negative, the GCF is negative. So we're going to put a negative sign. 5 and 15 are both divisible by 5, so we've got a negative 5 in front of my parentheses. When we divide by negative 5, we're going to get x minus 3. The binomials have to match. You've got to make sure the binomials match. So you've got to divide by negative 5, not just 5. You're dividing by negative 5. Now, notice the x minus 3's match. That's my GCF. What goes in the second parentheses is the x squared and the minus 5. Let's do one more with a minus sign in the middle. So we draw my 2 sets parentheses with a plus sign. That will not change, y'all. Minus 2x and minus 14 go in the second parentheses. Now, here, it's got an x squared. Y'all haven't noticed yet, it's always got an x squared. I'm making it have an x squared in the first one. The second one, though, the first term is negative. So my GCF will be a negative. And not only that, it's going to be a negative 2. They're both divisible by negative 2. So when I divide by negative 2, we're going to get positive x plus 7. These two have to match. If they don't match, you've done something wrong. Alright, so here is the binomial that's exactly the same. That goes in front. What goes in the second parentheses is the x squared and the minus 2. And that is factored by grouping.